Our February theme suggests we live love more deeply through the practice of inclusion. But what does it mean to practice inclusion? The Soul Matters Sharing Circle reminds us that there is in human nature a primal hunger to belong, to be let in. No one likes standing outside the circle. From the time we are little, inclusion and belonging is the thing we seek, the Holy Grail, the promised resting place. We are hardwired to create safe sanctuary for ourselves, but once that's found, it is far too easy to pull the life raft back into the boat. Soul Matters reminds us, beware of the kind of belonging that only wants to bless you. Closed circles don't just set us apart, they also set us above. During these early days of our country's new administration, I notice I am setting myself above, living inside a bubble of privileged sanctuary. I am already among the included. So it's easy for me to feel exempt from the pain being inflicted on others. Arresting, detaining, and deporting immigrants, that's not my problem. I was born in New Jersey to white American citizens. My citizenship cannot be questioned like that of my undocumented neighbors. Declaring male and female to be the only two genders, that does not affect me in any way. I am a cisgendered woman, so I am not threatened by that declaration. Ending diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, I'm mostly retired, so the withdrawal of such initiatives has no impact on me. I'm not alone in my response. A friend of mine declares, "Not my problem," every time this administration issues a new edict. My next-door neighbor told me he's choosing to ignore what's happening because doing so makes him a much happier person and a better husband and father. During the late 1930s, German theologian and Lutheran pastor Martin Niemöller wrote a poem called "First They Came," pointing to the German population's inaction as the Nazi regime gained power and the inevitable result of such inaction. You've probably heard it before. First, they came for the communists, and then the socialists, the trade unionists, and the Jews. And I did not speak because I was not a communist or a socialist or a trade unionist or a Jew. Then they came for me. There was no one left to speak out for me. I offer some updated verses. First, they came for the undocumented immigrants, and I did not speak out because I am not an undocumented immigrant. Then they came for the transgendered, and I did not speak out because I am cisgendered. Then they came for gay and lesbian marriages, and I did not speak out because I'm not gay. As long as what's happening doesn't threaten us, the need to remain safe can lead us to ignore injustice. But what if the current administration comes after me or you? In his letter from a Birmingham jail, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. wrote, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly." This is not a new story. Rabbi Hillel, a Jewish religious leader, sage, and scholar who lived in the 1st century BCE, wrote, "If I am not for myself, then who will be for me? If I am not for others, what am I? If not now, when?" We are in this together. As Dr. King said, either we go up together or we go down together. It is not enough to create safe sanctuary only for ourselves. The practice of inclusion calls upon us to live love more deeply by creating sanctuary, not just for ourselves, but for everyone. And the time to do that is now.
Thank you, Sheila. If you want to spend some more time with Dr. King's words, there is another public reading today at 2 p.m. at the Black History Museum in Redwood City that I'll be participating in. It is now Black History Month, because we're in February. It doesn't matter if the administration declares that there is no Black History Month, because we will still celebrate it. Let's take a deep breath together. What do you think of when you hear the word sanctuary? Call it out. Safety. Did someone say hope? Home. Safety. Acceptance. Hope. Protection. Choir. Peace. Belonging. Yeah. Sacred space. Refuge. Over the past few years, we here have talked a lot about this sanctuary, this space. It's a beautiful space, a sacred space. And the reason it is sacred is because of what we aspire to here, what we focus on and promise to practice together. Things like community, compassion, transformation, inclusion, generosity, justice, spiritual growth, right relationship, love. The design of this sanctuary, the aesthetics, are meant to inspire us, to evoke certain thoughts, feelings, and experiences that shape our living, the choices we make, the way we speak and act, in other words, who we become. This beautiful room, this space is meant not only to be a sanctuary, but to help us become sanctuaries ourselves, individually and collectively, to become sanctuary people. This building has also been a place of physical safety for those in need of protection, an important and sacred practice if there ever was one. The religious practice of sanctuary stems back to the ancient practice of hospitality. Houses of worship have served over the millennia as hospitals and hospices, as safe houses for victims of violence, fugitives from slavery, conscientious objectors, and most recently, refugees and asylum seekers. This community has a long aspired to create safe space here for an ever-widening circle. In 1989, and again 2 years ago, you committed to becoming an anti-racist congregation. In 1998, you voted to become a welcoming congregation for LGBTQ+ people and their families. In 2017, you voted to sign a national sanctuary pledge that included a willingness to provide physical sanctuary for a person at risk of deportation. A small team prepared the upstairs apartment above the kitchen, and together you housed an undocumented Honduran refugee fleeing persecution as a trans woman, accompanying and supporting her over several years. Again and again, you have chosen to become a sanctuary congregation. Right now, the need for sanctuary is greater than it's ever been in my lifetime. The second Trump administration is taking a more hostile and aggressive approach to just about everything. including stripping away the sensitive locations designation that protected religious institutions, schools, and hospitals from immigration enforcement in prior years, something that kept us all safe. Because people need to be able to go to school. They need to be able to go to law enforcement when they're in trouble. They need to be able to go to hospitals, and they need to be able to worship. Now, that new stripping away of the sensitive locations protection doesn't mean that we cannot still practice sanctuary. It just means the practice might look a little different, might not be as focused on physical sanctuary. But the sanctuary movement has never focused only on physical sanctuary. It has always included accompaniment, advocacy, material support, and public witness. And of course, it's not just undocumented immigrants who are at risk right now. Transgender people, those in need of reproductive health care, queer people and disabled people, people of color and poor people, people with mental illness, those who depend on federal assistance and social safety nets, which is most of us, endangered ecosystems and species, clean air and water, all vulnerable and at risk. So we need to expand our understanding of the practice of sanctuary. It's not just about opening up our building. It's about who and how we are in the world. It's about what kind of spaces we create inside and all around us. Let's take another breath. So how do we become sanctuary people? We practice it. And I want to talk about 3 aspects of sanctuary practice this morning. Internal sanctuary, relational sanctuary, and collective sanctuary. All important and all connected. So the first one, the internal practice of sanctuary. By this, I mean tending to our inner states, our spirits, our souls. The shock and awe of the past 2 weeks is meant to overwhelm and immobilize us. Sowing chaos and panic is a tactic that we must recognize and resist. This doesn't mean sticking our heads in the sand, shutting off the news, or hardening our hearts. It means being disciplined about taking care of our own inner states so we can face what is happening right now without adding fuel to the fire or burning ourselves out. When we tend to our own inner sanctuaries, we are more able to respond rather than react. In December, some of you may remember or not that I preached about engaged Buddhism, focusing on the Vietnamese Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh. He's also a peace activist. Remember what he said about the monks who were doing humanitarian work in the fires of war? They had to meditate in order to keep doing their peace and relief work. They had to. It wasn't an option. If they didn't, they too would have been consumed by hatred, rage, and despair. Whether or not we consider ourselves activists, there are lessons in this for us. It is possible for spiritual practice itself to become a sanctuary. When the world around us is on fire, when our lives feel like they are crumbling for one reason or another, it is possible to find and create sanctuary within ourselves. We create inner sanctuary through meditation, prayer, or any other form of regular practice that centers, grounds, and connects us to sources of love, hope, and goodness inside and beyond us. After years of mindfulness practice, I find sanctuary in my breath. When I'm spinning out with anxiety or stress, coming back to my breath helps me feel a sense of spaciousness that allows me to be present with more openness and compassion. And when I can do that, I'm more likely to be able to create a sense of sanctuary with those around me too. If you do not have a regular spiritual practice that centers and grounds you, now is a really good time to start one. Or if you do have one, you might need to double it. If you're interested in meditation, come to our monthly First Tuesdays with Tovis mindfulness meditation and tea. We are meeting on Tuesday, this next Tuesday, here in the sanctuary. Let's take another breath together. When we are able to create sanctuary inside ourselves, we bring it with us wherever we go. That's an important part of becoming sanctuary people. But it's not sufficient, because we can't become sanctuary people by ourselves. Sanctuary is also relational, which brings me to the second practice, the relational practice of sanctuary. Being sanctuary for another person, or creating sanctuary through the quality of our relationships, maybe a little bit like umbrella sanctuary we heard in the children's story. It's an important one for us Unitarian Universalists because, as Jack mentioned earlier, we covenant to walk together in a spirit of love, as our Puritan forebears put it. Whether this space feels safe or not, or any space for that matter, depends on the quality of the relationships in it, how we treat each other, how we welcome newcomers, how willing we are to make space for difference, how we navigate conflict, practice accountability, whether we can speak the truth in a spirit of love, how well we listen to each other. Creating this kind of relational sanctuary is an ongoing practice. It takes intention and care, and it takes tending our inner sanctuaries too. And it is something that we are still working on here. Right now, the kind of relational power that is on full display in our country is dominance, power over instead of power with, an aggressive form of patriarchal power. Call me a nasty woman for speaking this aloud from the pulpit, but we are done with that model of male power, yes? Yes. Are you with me? Yes. We are done with that model of male power. That doesn't mean it's not still going to come at us, but it does mean we're not going back. We're not going back. I am a mother of 2 teenage sons, and I'm fierce about this. We are done pressuring boys and men to hide or deny parts of themselves that might be considered weak, like empathy, kindness, or humility. These human qualities are sources of strength, of relational sanctuary, and we will not sacrifice them for a false sense of security. We will not sacrifice our boys either. The relational climate in our country is one of escalating mistrust, fear, and division. If I am a federal employee and I attend a diversity, equity, and inclusion training, who will snitch on me? If I am trans, who will out me? If I am undocumented, who will turn me over to ICE or my parents? If I live in an anti-choice state, who will report me if I get an abortion or perform one? If I refuse to comply, if I dare to speak truth to power, what will they do to me? It is impossible to feel safe in such a climate. Even those who comply, those who seek to stay close to that kind of power, they know their position is tenuous. And the bullies with the big sticks, they are scared too, because they know no one trusts them either. In such a climate, our covenantal practice can become a form of resistance, a form of relational sanctuary, creating safety between us through the quality of our relationships. What if we printed out our covenant of right relations and read it as a sacred text each morning and at the start of every meeting? What if we wrote our covenants more poetically so they felt less like rules and more like prayers of the heart? maybe then we would want to read them. We can do that. What if creating covenants was not an empty ritual, as it sometimes feels in UU spaces, but a deeply faithful and transformative practice, a way of creating sanctuary? We become sanctuary people by creating sanctuary within and between us. Let's take another breath. There's a third dimension to becoming sanctuary people, and that one is the collective dimension. We can practice inner sanctuary and relational sanctuary and still remain in our silos. To become sanctuary people, we need to connect with those outside our familiar circles who are working to create sanctuary too in our cities, county, across the state and country. My loves, it doesn't matter that you don't have a social justice committee here. It doesn't matter. We're not going to solve the problems we are facing by ourselves. We don't have the answers. Many of us lack the direct, lived experience necessary for understanding the needs of the most vulnerable anyway. What matters most right now is that we connect with others who are already doing the work outside in the community, especially those guided by people who are most impacted. We can't be in solidarity if we aren't in relationship, if we don't know what those who are most impacted actually need and want. And if we are not already in relationship with people who are most impacted, that's okay. We can still help create sanctuary by connecting with the organizations who are and asking how we can help. Some of you are already involved, deeply involved, with organizations out in the community working for justice, and perhaps others would like to hear about that work and join you. Or maybe some of you want to go together to a meeting, check out a new organization. I encourage you to reflect, if you're not already involved, on what issue, they're all connected, but what issue do you want to focus on? We can't focus on all of them, but we can trust that there are people focusing on all the issues and that they do all intersect. But we need to focus on something that we actually really want to give ourselves to in this moment. I created a short list of local organizations on the back of the order of service, both national UU organizations and also local interfaith and community organizations here in the county. But of course, there are so many, many more. So maybe some of you will want to meet. You don't have to form a committee, but maybe you want to meet and do things together. You can connect with the Social Action Committee at the UU Fellowship of Redwood City or the members of the UU Coastside community who are deeply involved in the community working on local justice issues. If you'd like to get involved with the newly forming UU Climate Justice collaboration here in the county, you can talk to Miriam and Jim Menzel. Miriam and Jim, yes, they're here, back in here. It's a wonderful, wonderful, hopeful collaboration coming out of our UU Climate Justice Revival this fall. What matters most in the months and years to come is that all of us lend a hand somewhere, staying informed, listening to those most impacted, and as we are able, given our life circumstances, participating in the creation of collective sanctuary. UUSM is nestled in a diverse and immigrant-rich neighborhood. Many of us have been distributing red Know Your Rights cards and the yellow community hotline, rapid response hotline cards. These are available to help distribute in the foyer. This simple act, when done with appropriate sensitivity and subtlety, can signal that we care, and it helps get critical information out into the community for those who need it. At this point, there have been no sweeps or raids in our county, but there are a lot of rumors flying around that are causing vulnerable people to self-detain at home, not going to work or sending their kids to school out of fear. And this, of course, causes its own crises for families already on the edge. So it is very important that we share accurate information, but not rumors or fear. taking care of our own anxiety, tending our own inner sanctuaries so we don't add fuels to the fires is a critical part of sanctuary practice on all the levels. So is practicing relational sanctuary, being intentional about what happens in the spaces between us, whether it's here or with people we don't yet know outside these walls. When we interact with others, are we creating more fear or more trust, more separation or more connection? One more breath as I wrap up. On Martin Luther King Day, which was, of course, also Inauguration Day, civil rights attorney and law professor Sheila Eiffel wrote a powerful opinion piece. In fact, it was so powerful that I almost read the entire thing out loud instead of writing my own sermon. I really did. Maybe I should have. She said that as much as she wished that we would be inaugurating President Harris on Martin Luther King Day, celebrating the progress we have made as a nation, it was instead a day of reckoning. Eiffel writes, maybe this terrible thing that has befallen this country, this descent into fascism and oligarchy, invites us to be a more honest confrontation with the truth about the state of our democracy. Dr. King warned us. He feared Black Americans were seeking to, quote, integrate into a burning house. Had President Harris been inaugurated, would we have been lulled into believing that the house of our democracy was safe, that our work was done? You can read Sheila Eiffel's full piece. It's titled, It is MLK Day, Do Not Despair. This year especially, we have work to do. My friends, our democracy is not safe. Our country is not now and never has been a real sanctuary, much as our mythologies and aspirations suggest that it is. But the inclusive promise symbolized by the Statue of Liberty, that mother of exiles herself, has always been worth striving for, and it still is. The times are dark, but we will not despair. We are Unitarian Universalists, united by a promise to put love at the center of what we do, guided by our relational covenants, inspired by theologies of collective liberation, and called to put our faith into action in the world. We are sanctuary people, or at least we can be if we practice it internally, relationally, and collectively. May it be so, and amen.
Keep it nice and steady, and keep it going until it's time to stop. I'll make it obvious. Keep it going.